we're going to take a deep dive into the full nerdiness of prairie plant ecology, prairie establishment. I realize there may be some people in the room that are more interested in that or less interested in that, and I apologize if you're less interested in that. But what we've been able to do with support from the Iowa Nutrient Research Center is to take a stab at testing a really important question, or a couple of very important questions that a lot of people have told us they have on their minds about prairie seed mixes and also about first-year establishment. And our former research and restoration program manager, Dave Williams, designed this study specifically to answer some of these questions that we think can really make a difference in terms of people's success in planting a high-quality, long-lasting, and cost-effective prairie. So we're really focusing in on making seed mix designs cost-effective and making the plantings themselves long-lasting so that we don't lose that practice because of poor establishment. And Dave's no longer with us. We are in the middle of a search for that new position, and we're very hopeful we'll be able to find someone equally good at conceiving of and developing these experiments. So how do you do a cost-effective seed mix and something that lasts in the landscape? Our background is in working with roadside managers. It's a strip. It's a very narrow strip of vegetation between a road and a crop field. So this is a natural for us to work with people with very practical interests in prairie establishment in some very severe conditions. And what you're about to see is kind of builds on kind of a long history of doing this kind of research with support from Living Roadway Trust Fund. So Living Roadway Trust Fund kind of has formed the basis for our understanding of plant establishment, and now we can build on that and transfer it for these other uses. I think roadsides, why roadsides? Well, county roadsides make up 46% of all public lands in the state, believe it or not. And then when you add the state roadsides, it's well over 50%, it's 60%. So for Iowa, it's a lot. Applied research and this type of thing has, over the years, we've done many things, and I'm sure Daryl could probably find holes in this list as well. Seed mix design, we've done work on seeding methods, what kind of planter, what kind of seeding depth, all kinds of iterations. Use of nurse crops, site preparation conditions, post-seeding management. We have a whole thing on how to keep the mice from eating the seeds that we put out there. So there's a number of different studies that have been accomplished over the years, many of these funded by Living Roadway Trust Fund. The essential problem is this. This is what it looks like the first year when you do a prairie planting. And then second year, even worse. Like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster, right? Actually, you can see the big blue stem seed heads sticking up here if you really know what you're looking for, which most people don't. And then in the third year, okay, this is starting to look like at least there's some color here. And in the fourth year, with the famous Unidome in the background, really well, nicely established prairie. So it can look horrible the first couple of years, but if you don't know any better, you would say you had a failure on your hands. So our objectives are to develop seed mixes and planting practices that result in the minimal cost per plant established. The minimal cost per plant established, because that's what you're buying. You're buying ecosystem function, nutrient retention, stopping soil erosion, pollinators, all that is plants. So you want the minimum cost per plant, and you want the maximum long-term site quality. And site quality has to do with species diversity, and it has to do with lack of weeds. So these are very practical considerations. Lack of weeds. We know lots of stories where the planting wasn't done properly, lots of gaps, lots of holes. Just a few years later, the weeds have taken over, and the whole thing gets torn up. So there are a lot of different factors that go into this that we've learned over time, seed mix design being a primary one. But, and so one of the questions that's out there right now is, what about the typical seed mix that many people are planting for pollinator habitat? It's designed to work for the whole state of Iowa. It's got a lot of species of forbs in it. It's sanctioned by, encouraged by the NRCS. And it is what we would call a canned mix. In other words, it's used everywhere. We wanted to test that against a customized mix that was designed specifically for the site conditions that it was planted in. A second question, which goes along with the first, is this ratio of grasses to forbs. Forbs are wildflowers, broadleaf plants. And the pollinator mix that has been promoted by NRCS has a ratio of 1 grass to 3 forb seeds on a per square foot basis. So that's 1/4 of the seeds are grass seeds, 3/4 of the seeds are forb seeds. Our experience has been that that is too forb heavy for many of the reasons that we discussed. So we wanted to test that idea. And then also a second kind of layer has to do with the first year management practices. We've learned over time that if you mow frequently the first year to allow sunlight to get into the ground level, the prairie seedlings will grow bigger, faster, fewer of them will die, and they will be much stronger going into their second season. So we wanted to test these things. We held everything else constant. So this was a replicated randomized design, kind of like an agronomy experiment. Seeding rate, data planning, soils, equipment, the operator of the equipment, all these things make a huge difference. So the only way to really test these ideas and get a decent result is if you hold all these other things still while you just vary the things you're interested in. This is the Nashua Research Station, ISU Research Station. Here are replicated plots. They're pretty small, but they are in a strip going down the slope. And the experimental design was just 3 seed mixes crossed with 2 mowing treatments, so 6 total combinations, 6 replicates, and we planted last April 29th. And then we did sampling in September. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the sampling. But here are the 3 seed mixes. The first seed mix here on the left was $130 an acre. This is a mix that's popular for certain CRP applications. 300 grass seeds to 100 forb seeds. So it's a 3-to-1 mixture. It's very economical. There's 21 species in it. And this is a canned mix that is Pheasants Forever basically is offering, and there's a lot of that going out on the landscape. This is the diversity mix that was designed here at the center using the seed mix calculator that Jim is going to tell us about in a few minutes. It's a 1-to-1 mix of grasses to wildflowers, and there's 71 species in it. And then the pollinator mix, it's $280 an acre. Last year's prices. This year's prices, a lot higher. The pollinator mix that we're told was planted on 4,000 acres in Blackhawk County alone last year, just in our county, and very, very high cost share rates, 108 versus 324, so 1 to 3 grass to forb ratio, and 38 species. So this is the one. It costs more. There's more forbs in it. It's actually fewer species. But this is really, we're sort of pitting these two against each other. So for the rest of the talk, I'm mainly going to be talking about the diversity versus the pollinator mix. But there will be data on this one as well. Here is what one of the 2 research plots looked like last June. And this is a nurse crop, was it winter wheat? Or oats, of oats to prevent soil erosion. So the collected data, basically what you want to know when you're collecting data on a study like this is how many plants came up, what species were they, and how big were they. Those are the 3 things you really want to know. That's what's going to predict what this planting is going to look like 5 years from now where it really counts. Number, size, and species. So I've got 3 graphs, and they're not bad. They're intelligible. This is the number of seedlings found in a square meter, and we have the diversity, the UNI diversity mix on the left. We have the pollinator mix in the middle, and we have the grass mix on the right on all of these slides. The grass mix is the 3 grasses to 1 forb mix with Pheasants Forever. Yeah.
The grass mix is in the middle?
Yeah.
Grass mix is in the middle. Yeah, so diversity, grass, pollinator. Total seedlings per square foot, per square meter, 40 for the diversity mix, about 12 for the pollinator mix. Forbs, if you break that down into the wildflowers versus the grasses, the wildflowers were the same in the diversity and the pollinator. They didn't differ significantly. Where things were really different is in the grasses. The diversity mix had a lot more grass cover and numbers than the pollinator mix.
For total seed, is that weed seeds and oats and everything, or is this just prairie?
This is just prairie.
Okay.
Yeah. We have data on the weeds and the oats as well, and I will show a little bit of the weed data later on. The weed data basically wasn't different in the 3. Here's the species diversity. They did all start out with different species diversity, but what we're really interested in here, if we're asking, well, how well does this function as a pollinator mix? We're talking about wildflowers that bloom. And so we don't even really have to look at this or this. If you just look at this, there was more total wildflower diversity that came up in our diversity mix than in the pollinator mix, because these 2 letters are different. So even though we planted fewer seeds of the forbs, more of them came up, more of them survived. Mowing was our other question. Do you need to mow? How much difference does it make? Mowing takes time. You got to drop what you're doing. And you have to do it in a timely manner. And so a lot of people blow off the mowing the first year, thinking that it's not necessarily all that important. We planted it. We're done with that. We've got a lot of other things to do. So half of each plot was mowed and half was left unmowed. That was in a randomized pattern there. And that's what it looked like in the fall. Here's what it looks like on the ground. In the mowed plots, you can see a lot of bare soil. You can see prairie plants coming up. I'm sure you all picked up on this plant here. That's prairie plant that when it gets to be mature, it'll be this big, right? But the first year, you need to be able to recognize it looking like that. Here's what it looks like in the no-mow. It is a dark forest underneath there, and you cannot see any prairie seedlings because it's a mass of weeds and of oats that reseeded themselves. So there's a lot of seedling oats in there as well. So that's what it looks like. We did some light environment measures. And here's the bottom line. If you mow, you get nice, big, healthy plants that are ready to take on the weeds. And if you do not mow, they're tiny. And they basically we're starved for light. And this is something that you really just have to see it to believe it. You just have to be out there and you have to see the contrast. I'm sorry, Jason? Yeah.
So you're seeding with the nurse crop and then mowing
Mowing the nurse crop, that's right. Mowing the nurse crop as well as whatever agronomic weeds are coming up. Yeah, thank you. Good point. Yeah. So plant size, when you look at the plants in the prairie plants in the mowed and the unmowed, the forbs, they're 3 or 4 times bigger. The grasses are 3 or 4 times bigger. The weeds, twice as big. So this is the weed species. We're using a basal area measure. And then you have the reseeded oats contributing to the competition as well. So competition is really important in the first year of a prairie establishment. And if you can limit the competition with the annual weeds that are going to come up no matter what, you can really give a boost to your prairie planting that makes a huge difference later on. Many of our plants actually flowered in the first year, which normally they wouldn't do. Plant establishment is much higher, greater percentage of emergence in the mowed versus the unmowed, which basically saves you money. The more plants that come up, the more money you save, because what we're after is plants. So I just went ahead and calculated the cost per 1,000 plants for each of these seed mixes with and without mowing. So focusing again on our diversity mix versus the pollinator mix. If you mow and you plant the seed mix that we would recommend, it costs you $1.22 per 1,000 plants. If you do the pollinator mix, it costs you $5.38 per 1,000 plants. And if you forget to mow, it costs you $17 per 1,000 plants. So people focus on the cost that they paid for the seed mix. This was $130, this was $280, this was $370. That's what they focus on. But if you think about the cost per plant that you actually get in the ground, this is a much, much more expensive way to go than actually having a customized mix that works for your site. Now later on, when we get into the seed calculator, I'll have a applied example for you to show you why you get more plants if you use a customized mix that's designed specifically for your site. Total number of species in the plots, when you walk around and you look, only 12 for this grass mix, 29 for the 29 forb species were detected, and only 17 in the pollinator mix. So not only are we winning in terms of numbers of plants and size of plants, but we're winning in terms of the number of wildflowers that are in the site. Yeah.
Do you have an estimate for the mowing costs, or are those factored into this, or is this just planting costs?
I'm sorry, yeah, they're just planting costs, right? So it would not include, and that's a very good point. Yeah, because the mowing is important. What we got to think about here is this is like planting an orchard, right? We're doing a lot of work the first year, and it's costly, but this is something that is a very long-lived practice. But yes, it's an important one to factor in. So this is just to illustrate why the pollinator mix had such poor performance. Many of the species, this was a fairly mesic or wet mesic site. If you were looking at a soils map, you would say somewhat poorly drained and sort of wet. And so in pink are all the species of grasses and legumes and just a bit of the forb list that are poorly adapted for that site. So this is a canned mix, and many of the species in the canned mix are adapted for dry conditions. They are dead on arrival when you plant them here. So you might as well not pour that seed in the ground when it's dead on arrival. So that's why basically overall 37% of the species in the pollinator mix were poorly adapted for that site. And few, if any of them, are going to ever show their heads in this location. So you paid for the seed, but you didn't get what you paid for. Take home, we found that this 1-to-1 grass to forb custom mix optimized the cost and the quality. And the reason we say quality is that the more plants you have per square meter, the fewer weeds you have. And you want to take up all the space with plants. 40 plants per square meter is a great number. That's what you want. The mowing increases your success by at least 3-fold, and that's just plant number. When you look at plant size, it's really much greater than that. And this 1-to-3 grass forb can mix was the least cost effective any way you look at it. You got to be able to identify seedlings. This is a highly technical thing. Not a lot of people want to learn how to do that. We literally get down into the weeds, so you don't have to. Next steps, second year of data, sharing our results with the NRCS, encouraging people to try using the seed mix calculator, which Jim is going to talk about here in a second. And that video will be online and that's being produced today. And then expanding our audience to you all, the crop consultants, to other people that might have use for this information, and assisting ISU strips with their work and helping them out. And this is our funding source. Many collaborators helped, including People's Company. And this is a monarch in Mexico who clearly ate the milkweed that we planted on the roadsides in Iowa. He's looking very happy here. So thanks, and I'll take any questions if there's time, but you're in charge. Yeah, okay.
So pollinator mix is the NRCS mix that's required.
That's right. It's a 3-to-1 mix, and we're not here to dump on Pheasants Forever, but Pheasants Forever is a popular supplier of a mix that meets those qualifications. So so we chose to use Pheasants Forever's mix because a lot of people are using that, and we wanted to be able to test that. Yeah. Probably too much detail, too much gnarly detail for right after lunch, but this is the way you go about this kind of research. It's pretty straightforward, and it can offer some very useful applied results that can inform and help us to save money, because we can plant less seed, we can plant it more accurately, and plant more adapted seed, and that will bring down the cost for everybody, and in that way we can increase the total amount of it that gets planted.
So is erosion going to be a concern then, and all this pollinator CRP that?
We would predict that both erosion and weediness. So thistles, you've got some weeds that are just kind of veto weeds. As soon as they show up, that's it, off with its head, right? We're going to just plow up the whole thing. And Canada thistle would be one of those. So in any prairie planting, we recommend going in and spot spraying for thistles in particular, that first couple of years, getting them when they're small. But the more spaces you have between the good guys, the more weeds you're going to have. So this is about people having a good experience, having a stand they can be proud of. It doesn't have to be planted far from the road. And then hopefully keeping that in practice, because it's working for them. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll be around to answer any questions, so.
What height are you mowing when you do that?
It depends on what equipment you have, but the prairie plants are staying pretty short because they're growing down. They're growing that root system. So I don't know, 6 to 8 inches?
Yeah, about 6. Once there's that mid-shin,
Yeah, and it's tricky with the nurse crops because once those seed stalks start to bolt, it happens very fast. So you might be driving by, you notice, it's probably getting about time to mow, and the next time you come back around, it's this tall. So it does require some observation and thinking about that.
Would there be any risk of mowing too often, like more than 3 times?
No, there wouldn't be the first year. The second year, you really want to stay away. But Dave and I did an experiment where we mowed every week, all summer long, and it was perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, it was perfect. Yeah. Yes.
What kind of mower are you using?
Let's see. What did they use at Nashua? Do you know, Ashley? I don't know if Dave brought our mower. Yeah.
he did the first one.
Yeah. Greg?
Probably, I don't know if he's a Nashua, a brush mower.
The battery
track-
mower or something like that?
Yeah. Or yeah.
Yeah.
They might have used just riding lawnmower at Nashua.
The plots are real small, and the replicated plots. We do have these same treatments at Dysart, and very large. One of those large strips, 0.9 acre strips, is a third. So you can see those different treatments, and we also mowed half and left half. But one of the things that we're doing is trying to put more of these demonstration sites, not necessarily replication, randomization, but demonstration sites where you can walk around and see the different options in several locations across the state. because we feel like just data, I mean, I'm a scientist, I love my data, but I know, believe me, I know from teaching, it's much better if people can walk around and look at it and see somebody else's mistake or deliberate mistake rather than have it happen on their land. And so this having contrasting treatments in a couple places, I think, will be useful for people.